Alright everybody, we are back with the Emerald review for Set 7 ARCHAZIA'S Island. Again, you can check out the other ink color reviews on my channel. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to see more of these coming through, as well as many deck profiles when we get to seeing the actual physical cards come out on Friday, March 7th. Anyways, the Amber Emerald and the Amethyst Emerald cards were already reviewed in the previous video, so we're going to skip over those. We're going to go straight into the Emerald cards and see what other dual inks we can find here. So, starting off, we've got Drizella. 4 cost, inkable 4/4, quest for 1, nothing to see there. Next up, we've got Grunage. Don't know how to say it. Grunage, yeah? I don't know what that's from. Is that from, what do you call it? Treasure Island? Looks like a Treasure Island card. Anyways, a 2 cost, inkable 2/2. Whenever this character quests, you may pay 1 less for the next action you play this turn, and it quests for 1. Not a bad card, but probably more applicable in draft than it is in constructed. Next up, you got 2 cost 3/2 Baymax low battery. This character enters play exerted at 2 lore quester. Yeah, I mean a 3/2 is obviously not too great. Yeah, I don't really see how this card could be applicable really. Maybe in some Emerald Amber willpower boosting deck or a bodyguard variation or something, but really it's a tough sell, I think. I mean, at least it enters play exerted, and whatever your opponent challenges into it gets banished likely as well, but you know, it's just not good late game and stuff like that, so underwhelming overall. Next up, you got Tommy O'Malley, a 3 cost inkable 4/2 body with ward, quest for 1, so again, nothing too relevant there. You got Pete, a 1 cost 1/2, and it's a pirate and a villain. Whenever you play an action that isn't a song, you may banish chosen item. So interesting card. Nothing I think sees play. It has the Pete name, which could be relevant for the future, but I'd rather play the Clarabelle because the shift right now is way better, and you have the ability to just banish on summon instead of something like you have to wait to play an action to trigger this ability. At least you don't have to pay any extra ink, right? Because the 1 cost Clarabelle's ability is a 2 ink kicker ability when it comes into play. It's good to see a versatile card like this come through though, but I don't think it's very good, and it probably doesn't see any play really, unless we get a good Pete shift later on. Alright, next up we got Hiro Hamada, future champion, a 3 cost 3/3, okay, so, and it has an effect, so it could be good. When you play a Floodborn character on this card, draw a card. Alright, not bad, depending on how good the Floodborn or Floodborns are going to be for Hiro Hamada. Next up, you got a new Cheshire Cat, a 5 cost inkable 4/3. When you play this character, you may deal 2 damage to chosen damaged character, and it quests for 2. So playing into that whole Emerald theme of, you know, if you have an opponent's damaged character in play, then you can do a lot of these effects based on the kind of character. Could be a thing, because I think it's got some decent support this set, but overall, right now, it falls into the same category as everything else in this. You know, you get X effect if you're or to your opponent's damaged character, which is not very playable. Next up, you got Shere Khan, a rare of 4 cost uninkable 4/4 that quests for 4. Wow, when you play this character, discard your hand. That's very interesting. This card will definitely see play, I think, in super hyper aggro variations of Emerald. Where your hand is already like empty by the time you get to 4 ink, more or less, because you're playing out like multiple characters in a turn on 1 and 2 potentially. Well, not 1, but like 2, 3, and then 4 you might drop this. Interesting card. Very, yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good for the aggro decks. I'm not a big fan of aggro though. I'm not a very aggro oriented player myself. I don't like to just like not have any options available to me and feel helpless if I can't win the match, you know, within my one like oriented game plan, but I could see this card being played for sure. It will likely be worth something, similar to what happened with Cursed Merfolk. Probably worth a couple bucks. Anyways, we got Basil, another rare Secret Informer, a 6 cost inkable 3/6 character that quests for 3. Whenever this character quests, opposing damaged characters gain Reckless during their next turn. So again, pretty expensive, doesn't have a shift, does quest for 3, but is a 3/6. Probably doesn't see play in the damaged focus deck, even if you could play this. It's just too expensive, and you have to wait for it to quest for it to get its ability. And if you've been watching my channel, you know how we feel about, oh, this character has to quest to trigger the ability. Very slow, very telegraphed, usually not too good. All right, next up we've got Mad Hatter, the first well, I guess the first one that we're going to review, Dual Ink card in Emerald Ruby. 6 cost inkable 3/5. Whenever a damaged character challenges another character, you may draw a card. Quest for 2. So this is similar to the Scar from Shimmering Skies, set 5. I searched Scar. Why did so many different cards come up? Okay, anyways, this one here. Whenever one of your characters challenges a damaged character, you may draw a card. Okay, so kind of similar. Whenever your character challenges a damaged character, and then this one is whenever a damaged character challenges another character. Okay, so this is better. Well, I shouldn't say better. The Scar costs less, has a 4/2 stat line, and has Ward, I believe. So actually the Scar, well, depends on the effect, right? Or which one you want. So the Scar triggers when your character challenges an opponent's damaged character, and this one triggers on either side. So if your opponent has a damaged character or you have a damaged character, only one of you need a damaged character to be challenging, and then that will trigger the Mad Hatter to draw a card. Obviously, though, this card is susceptible to any form of removal. If it quests, it itself is vulnerable to challenging. It does not have Ward like the Scar does. So again, a tough ask at such an expensive cost for an ink pairing that doesn't have any ramp. Next up, you've got a 5-cost Queen of Hearts, and I'm actually really interested in this card. I'm a fan of it, simply because, well, first of all, it's a 5-cost. It is uninkable, but it's a shift 3, which means it shifts on the existing rush 2 or 2-cost rush Queen, which I talked a lot about last set being a force that people should, or a tech that people should be putting into their decks. And you did see some competitive play. It made it to all the way to like the finals of the North American Championships and things like that. And it was played a lot in Red Blue and sometimes in Ruby Amethyst to a certain extent. But yeah, I like this card. I think it's pretty decent, at least for the metas that we were in previously, because it can challenge down stuff pretty efficiently, take out Smees when they're exerted, and if the Smee takes the damage, it trades well with the Smee, that kind of thing. A lot of versatility. So it gives you another reason to play this in this ink pairing, which again has been a hard sell historically because this ink pairing has not really existed competitively before. But whenever another character is played, put a damage counter on them. So this reminds me of that Pokemon ability in the VGC games. I forget what it's called, something spikes, I think. Whenever a character comes into play, it takes X amount of damage. So this right away nullifies all of the X and 1 aggro threats that you may face, or X and 1 characters, basically, like utility characters, etc., that people may be playing. As soon as it comes into play, put a damage counter on them. It gets around resist, notably, because it puts a damage counter. It doesn't deal damage. So like a Cinderella Stout-Hearted comes into play, it will take the damage because the damage counter gets put onto it. Similar to how Bell will be able to move damage, like the Amethyst Bell moves damage counters, and it gets past resist that way. So we're seeing some interesting interactions here. You get this big body out on 3 potentially. It's tough to deal with 6 willpower. Yes, it still gets brawled away on curve on 3, and then you go -1 because you shifted a character on top of it likely. But it does quest for 2, and it can put on some pressure pretty early on in a deck that can go aggro, right? I mean, Emerald Ruby can be an aggro-oriented deck with this kind of card backing it up, dealing damage to your opponent's stuff to keep them in check, so to speak. Next up, we've got Hiro Hamada, the Emerald Sapphire Shift card, 7-cost inkable 4/6, Shift 5, quest for 3, pretty good. Your Floodborn characters that have a card under them gain Evasive and Ward. So you play this on top of the other Hiro Hamada, you draw a card, and then this card has Evasive and Ward, which, I'm not going to lie, that's pretty good. Evasive and Ward is an elusive, pun intended with Evasive, a very elusive combination that we haven't really seen too much of. This is an interesting artwork for the Enchanted. It's almost like anime style, but like American anime, I guess Disney anime style. But then this is very Disney oriented. Anyways, yeah, very stark differences in the artwork, which is cool. But yeah, I think this card is actually half decent. The issue is, are you really going to sacrifice all of the good playable cards in Emerald and Sapphire in order to play this package? Probably not, but it's not bad. Could be fun to play. May actually be somewhat competitive, but probably not. Next up, we've got Yokai Intellectual Schemer, 2-cost inkable 1/2. You pay 1 less to play characters using their shift ability. Okay, tying into, I guess, this is what they're going for with the dual ink on Emerald Sapphire. Play a bunch of shift characters and shift them on top of your characters, get, procking effects, etc. I mean, Evasive and Ward, like I was saying, is very good. Like, it's hard to challenge the thing, and even if they can, it's, pretty decently high statted, and it has Ward, so yeah, you can't really target it with anything. So like this thing is like constantly questing for 3. And that might be enough to warrant this package, right? Like, you can play Morph in this package as well, to make this thing live quicker. You're likely ramping in this ink pairing, so it looks like it's a very interesting concept when you think about it, because you haven't really seen this kind of deck really take off in Lorcana, but I think it does have some legs under it, and I would like to see it take off, which is like a mid-range aggro, which I know sounds very weird, but like, can I put up a beefy character that's hard to interact with and continue to aggro you while I don't necessarily need removal for your end of the board, but I'm putting up characters that are hard to deal with? So I'm not like low to the ground aggro where I'm just questing with stuff and trading out my bodies. I'm actually developing characters that stick on the board and aggroing you with that. It takes me time to develop my game plan, and I'm playing some control cards in the mix, but it's a little bit more of an active game style, if you know what I mean, right? Like, if we actually get to turns 5, 6, 7, and your aggro deck doesn't aim to end the game by turn 4 or 5, and if you don't do that, then you likely just lose the game from there. That's pretty stale gameplay in my opinion. It's why I was never really a fan of like these Amber Steel aggro decks. It's like it's so linear, right? It's like either you have the cards to stop them and they lose, or you kind of bricked up and they just got a decent curve and they win. Like it's one or the other. There's not really too much versatility in my opinion there. I know not all the games are like that, but I would like to see games go a little bit longer, and this is the kind of deck that could do it, forcing some interesting interaction and deck building choices if it became meta relevant. So props to the developers for taking that into consideration. All right, next up we've got Donald Duck, a 2-cost uninkable 1/1 body lucky pirate. It quests for 2. So whenever this character is challenged, you may return an action card that is not a song from your discard to your hand. This is a pretty interesting card. It's a decent card in my opinion. Depending on the deck, again, it warrants seeing play because it's good. The issue is, again, I mean, it's a 2-quester. It is a 1/1 body, so it is susceptible to a lot of removal, especially on the steel side. It is uninkable, so you have to play it out, but you usually don't mind playing a card like this out because similar to Merfolk, right? You're playing it, you're questing with it, you're getting the lore, but the difference is, like, Merfolk always trades 1 for 1. This card may not, and usually probably will not. Like, you have to have an action in your discard first of all to make this viable, so playing it on curve is likely not too good. It has to survive to be able to quest, and then it has to be challenged when it's removed. So that means if they like Storm Rage it or something, you get absolutely no value off of it, and that's really bad. Storm Rage is a problem. Storm Rage being, a card that replaces itself makes a lot of cards instantly -1. Cards like this, right? But that's where we're at. Next up, we've got Berlios. I don't know how to say that. I don't know what that's from either. Mischievous Kitten. Cute, though. 3-cost inkable 2/5 that quests for 1. Interesting card. Probably good in draft. We got our Lady Shift for the Emerald Amber Lady here. A 1-cost uninkable Elegant Spaniel. 1 strength, 2 willpower. While you have a character named Tramp in play, this character gets +1 lore. This is not a good card, especially since it is uninkable, which is unfortunate because I really do think that this lady, Miss Park Avenue, is a very good card. Very good card. 5-cost uninkable 4/4 with the shift 3. We just needed a good shift target, and unfortunately we did not get that. It's not unplayable, but it's not good in my opinion. This one quests for 2, and when you play this character, return up to 2 character cards with cost 2 or less from your discard to your hand. Like, that's huge, right? We're bring back Go-Go's, bring back Merfolks, bring back Ursula. We went over this in the Amber video. Like, there's so many things to bring back, and so unfortunately this isn't it. Not unplayable, but just not good, right? You're not playing this 1-drop over the many other better 1-drops that Emerald has, and whatever you pair Emerald with. Next up, we got a new Yzma, a 2-cost inkable 2/2 body that says when you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. So a cycle, but not very good. And it's the Yzma name, which seems to have some relevance in Lorcana, but probably will not see any play. Next up, we got a new Pacha, a 3-cost inkable 3/2 body. While you have more cards in hand than each opponent, this character gets +2 lore. Quest for 3. Unfortunately, I don't think this card sees any play. If it was a 3-cost 3/3 with this ability, I think it would have some legs under it. But at a 3/2, I just don't think it's worth the risk to play this. Even if you get a single quest off with it, like it on the clapback gets outed instantly, so you get an instant 3 lore, then you're negative on character advantage usually. But if it was a 3/3 like the White Rose, like, you know, it has some legs under it, like it's a body that can potentially survive into some things. So yeah, it's probably not going to see any play, but it's an interesting effect and a decent effect at that. I just think the stats could be better. Next up, we got Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You hear this all the time, but I actually don't even know what these guys are from. Rhyme not intended. Anyways, Strange Storytellers, a 5-cost inkable Emerald Ruby dual ink card, 4 strength, 4 willpower, so decent stats all around, and a quest for 2. So decent. Let's see what the effect is. When this character quests, you may return chosen damaged character to their player's hand. So this is a very interesting card. I think this is a good card, which is contradictory to what I've said about, oh, this character has to quest to proc the ability. This one's a little bit different. Because it costs 5, it is inkable. It has decent stats at 4/4, and it quests for 2, so you want to be questing with it. Just as a vanilla card, it's not the worst. It's not the best by any means, but it's not the worst. And then you have a really unique effect that you can bounce cards. You can bounce your own cards, you can bounce your opponent's cards. And that has a lot of value. So having that versatility on a card like this is pretty interesting. Can it see play in an Emerald Ruby deck? I think so. But will that deck be super competitive? Probably not. But if you build Emerald Ruby, I think there's a case to be made. If you're building it like, you know, with this damage stuff in mind, there's a case to be made that this card could be played in that. It is a decent card. I'll probably aim to pick up my foil playset of those because it'll probably be cheap just for a fun deck. Next up, we got a new Baymax. I think this is the first card and only card, if I recall, with Universal Shift. 6-cost uninkable 5/5 body uninkability. Doesn't matter when you're Sapphire. Oh man, I can't wait till we get to reviewing the Sapphire ink. Functionality improves. When you play this character, if you use Shift to play him, remove all damage from him. So if you have a character that you shifted him on top of, you remove all damage from him and you have a 2-quester. This card, okay, so how do I put this? This is I don't want to say a very good card, but this is, I can't say it's a very good card because it's stuck in Emerald Sapphire, which is not a bad ink pairing right now. But this card being able to instantly turn anything into a 5/5 body that quests for 2, I don't think people see the value in that yet. And it is something that that I know I will be picking up foil copies of. I should be putting this stuff behind a paywall, really. But, because I think pretty much all of my calls, except for like set 3 Jafar, saying that card was going to be worth money. Every other call I've made, which is a lot, since I think has more or less been pretty good. This card I think will be good. Now, will Emerald Sapphire be a force in the meta? That's to be seen. Will this card see play in Emerald Sapphire? I think this card is versatile enough that you could throw this into any Emerald Sapphire build. As long as you use characters. As long as we continue to use characters. There may be variations of decks where you play like 50 items and like 4 characters, and then obviously you don't play this. But that's probably a ways in the future. If you build Emerald Sapphire, I think there's a case to say that you can throw this into any variation of Emerald Sapphire that you want to make. I'm glad they made this an uncommon. I'll say that. All right, next up, we've got Gizmo Duck, 4-cost inkable, 4/3 body, Emerald Steel, resist 1. This character can challenge ready damaged characters. Okay, we need more challenging readied characters, but this has resist 1. It is a 4/3, 4 cost. I mean, it doesn't fit the identity of Emerald Steel right now. Did I see this card before? I know I reviewed the set, but I don't... I'm pretty sure I would remember a card like this. Maybe I missed this card. I'm trying to think if I remember... Like, I don't remember it. But anyways, it doesn't fit the... It doesn't fit the mold of what Emerald Steel is right now. It doesn't mean that Emerald Steel can't break out into other variations. When you look at this character, it's not a bad card. The issue The issue is just, well, I shouldn't say it's not a bad card. Like it's stat wise with the resist, it's not terrible, but the effect is just a nice little bonus. You're not really wanting to quest with this, so the one lore probably doesn't matter. You're using this as a control card. You're pairing it into steel, where you can damage characters relatively easily. It's an emerald that has a lot of effects that gain benefits when you have opponents damage characters, and then this card helps clean a lot of that up. It's versatile enough for that kind of deck to be played in it, but like, it's not a good card on its own. And it's not a card that's going to be like super meta competitive. I don't think. It's not a bad card though. Like if you're playing Emerald Steel, a variation that can utilize a card like this, I think you could say like, I can fit this in, throw this down on the board and be like, yeah, like your readied characters are now threatened by this and I have resist 1. So like I'll probably get at least a 2-for-1 trade out of this maybe. Like I challenge your readied character, you clap back and you lose your character as well, because the 4 strength is really hard to get over without losing a character in the meantime. So yeah, I think it's an okay card, but just a little hard to get the full value alpha of. It's just maybe just a little too conditional. I wish characters like to make these cards better, which I know we're not going to get because of the ink color of Emerald and Steel. I think they need Rush. Like being able to drop this and instantly have an impact to like take out a ready character would have made this card really good in that case. Probably not too good, but like good enough. I don't know. You can argue it would make it too good because we have Elsa, which taps down, and that's a 2/5 body, and we saw how good Elsa 5th Spirit was when it came out. And then this card having like Rush, air quotes, to challenge ready characters could also just be seen as broken because you're like, holy crap, you just dropped this, you have a 4/3, and you just instantly out my character. It probably would be too broken in that case, actually, at least for the power level that Lorcana is at right now. But that's what would make it good and playable. Next up, we got a 4-cost Emerald Ruby Fidget Sneaky Bat, 2 strength, 3 willpower, evasive, quest for 2. So stat-wise, underwhelming, but it does quest for 2 and it has evasive. Okay. And then a little ability. Whenever this character quests, choose another character of yours, or another chosen character of yours gains evasive until the start of your next turn. And that's good. At least, like, what they need to do in order to make cards, like, all cards at least somewhat viable, is if you're going to give something 2 lore, and you're going to have an effect that, that triggers when the opponent, when the character quests, that's when you give a character 2 lore. Don't give a character like 3 lore and then have an ability that like exert that it has to exert for, right? Like, yeah, you have versatility. I can quest with it or I can proc the ability, but like that's just a waste because I'm paying extra, right? I'm paying extra on the cost of the card because you're not making these cards like discounted for their abilities. If a card has certain number of abilities, the cost goes up. It's uninkable, it costs more, etc. The stats are weaker, it has less lore, etc. Don't give me a card where I have to gain all of the benefit, or sorry, some of the benefit from one effect and some of the benefit from actually questing. Give me the benefit. I get the 2 lore when I quest, and I get the ability when I quest as well. That's how the card should be designed to be like playable. Because if this was an exert effect, like, okay, I play this overcosted character for the stats and I'm losing out on the 2 lore, where this could have cost 3 and quested for 1, and I'm still using the ability over the quest, right? You know what I mean, guys? So this is the correct way for card design, I think. Anyways, whenever this character quests, another chosen character of yours gains evasive until the start of your next turn. Actually half decent, but again, because the stats are so underwhelming, probably doesn't see play even in Emerald's Ruby, but it's not bad. Like, you could play it, and in certain matchups this card could wreak havoc for sure, but in other matchups it's just a free takeout, right? Like in the removal based matchups, which everyone's playing either Ruby or Steel usually, so it's a tough ask. The evasive is nice and it helps. I don't think you can make this a 3/3. If you make it a 3/3, it probably quests for 1. I would take that trade. If it was a 3/3 quest for 1, it would have been better. The 2 strength just is not great, because to play this, develop the threat, and then just for it to get brawled next turn, like you technically lose the tempo on that, right? Because you paid the extra ink for the character. Next up, we've got an uninkable Mr. Smee, Emerald Steel, 3-cost uninkable 3/3 body. So that is stats you want to see, but uninkability hurts, quest for 1. Whenever you play an action that is not a song, you may ready chosen pirate character, which can include himself apparently. Not terrible for Emerald Steel Pirates, but it's probably not a competitive archetype. Nonetheless, though, it is a decent card. I mean, despite it being uninkable, I would say this is half decent, assuming that you build the Emerald Steel Pirate deck with a lot of actions. Yeah, the Mr. Smee is not bad. All right, next up we've got the Big Daisy deck here, multi-talented pirate. I almost read that as mutilated pirate for some reason. Anyways, 8 cost, uninkable, 6 strength, 5 willpower, so a huge body here. A lot of attributes: Dreamborn, Hero, Pirate, Captain. I'm waiting for that Dreamborn support. I'm waiting for, whatever Dreamborn support we can get. Once during your turn, whenever a card is put into your ink, while chosen opponent chooses one of their characters, returns that card to their hand. And returns that card to their hand. Oh, for some reason I thought this also discarded the card. Like return a card to the hand and force a discard. Yeah, I'm remembering this card wrong. Once per turn, whenever a card is put into your chosen opponent chooses one of their characters. Okay, yeah, so this is not as good as I thought it was, if I'm remembering correctly. Because if you're, it's not bad. Like, forcing your opponent to bounce is actually, good for your tempo. But your opponent being able to choose, it could be like, okay, choose my, exerted character, or choose, my rabbit, or choose my goat, or, choose my white rose, or a number of other Amethyst cards now that gain lore on play or something, or, card draw card, or whatever, removal card, etc. And it quests for 3, which is good, but uninkable, not a shift. So yeah, not a good card in my opinion, unfortunately. Awesome, more John Silver. I'm a big fan of the John Silver from the first chapter. I hope he comes back into playability. There was an Emerald Sapphire deck floating around that was playing him, that was having some moderate success. So I wonder if the new Emerald Sapphires will play him. We got to test and find out. Anyways, this one is an 8 cost inkable Vengeful Pirate, 6 strength, 4 willpower. So a little underwhelming on the willpower side. Would have liked to see this be a 6/6 maybe, but that's probably too much. Let's see the effects though. Quest for 2 has resist 1. If an opposing character was damaged this turn, you pay 2 less to play this character. Okay, that's actually a good effect, especially in Steel, and especially with what Emerald Steel wants to do. Whenever you play an action that is not a song, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. So I see what they've done here. Okay, I just realized this actually right now on the spot. All of these, you play an action that is not a song, is really getting around the broken synergy you would get with Ursula, Deceiver of All. Do you remember, if you watched my channel for a while, when I told you guys that card was going to be insanely powerful for the foreseeable future? It is very unlikely that a card like that gets power crept. So much so that it's influencing card design that we see right now. Because could you imagine whenever you play an action that isn't a song, could you imagine if it just says whenever you play an action and you double sing Let the Storm Rage On with Ursula, Deceiver of All, now you deal 6 damage to a target, you draw 2, and that Let the Storm Rage On goes to the bottom of your deck. That's how good that card is. That they had to design this archetype this way. A good card in my opinion for the Emerald Steel Pirates deck. I'm hyped to build a deck like this, man. I was a fan of this archetype, if you guys remember back for the OGs, when I built the Beast Relentless damage ping deck that would ready up the Beast and do quest for 10 in a turn or whatever. A much slower meta. And who's to say that Beast doesn't come back, right? Make a return. Cards with very simple text on them for their effects seem to be very powerful. Pot Agree, draw 2, pretty good. Anyways, yeah, I like this card. Not meta relevant, I don't think, or won't be. I mean, the thing about this is you can even play... I mean, no, you can't. No, you can't, because it has to be an action that isn't a song. So you really have to build around that. I mean, you could make a case to be like, I'm just playing this as a... Nah, you don't make that case. A 6 cost, 6/4, that quest for 2 and has resist 1? Nah. I mean, we got Tinkerbell from Emerald Steel, right? At least the discard heavy variant. Discard control variant. All right, next up we got Tramp. Enterprising Dog, 2 cost, inkable, 1/3 body, quest for 1. If you have a character named Lady in play, you pay 1 less to play this character. Okay, so again, these conditional things not very good. It is a rare, so I hope the second effect is good. I've already read these cards, but anyways, when you play this character, chosen character of yours gets +1 strength this turn for each other character you have in play. It could have some benefit, but honestly, it's probably going to be way too slow. They could have made the card that got the enchanted a little bit better. I'm not going to lie. I'm trying to think what could have been done to make this better, but it's not the worst. It's interesting. It only costs 2. It is a 1/3, similar to like Ursula Deceiver, right? But Ursula Deceiver has a pretty relevant effect. It sees your hand and you rip a song potentially. This one, it can be played for 1. It comes into play. It can potentially boost something up by a lot. But what Emerald deck are you really playing this in? It quests for 1. If it quested for 2, it would be way too good. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad card, because, I mean, coming into play, even boosting a character by +2 could be relevant to take out a threat, right? But, like, what are you trying to take out that you're really taking advantage of in a deck that would play this card is what I'm struggling with. I could be completely off the market, and this card could be, like, really, really good. But for what the utility is currently with Emerald, I just don't see this card being applicable to the existing Emerald playstyles. If you're playing an aggro deck that goes wide, you're not playing this hoping to challenge something, right? I mean, you do need to challenge sometimes, but like on 2, I'd rather just play a more efficient card, right? Or for 2 ink than to worry about trying to clean up my opponent's board. And then there is no real top end Emerald deck right now, and to get the other ability, you need to play Lady, which I think is only in Amber and Emerald, if I remember correctly. But yeah. Something to look at, but I would pass on it. Next up, you got a 4-cost uninkable King of Hearts with a 3/3 stat line and a quest for 2. So overall decent. It is uninkable, but it costs 4. For 3/3 is not the worst. Damaged characters can't challenge your characters. So again, a lot of combo potential with this card. So I know that there's a lot of ways that this card could be good, don't get me wrong, but I'm trying to not pigeonhole this card into like, oh, it's really good in these, it's like broken in these certain combos. It's like, could this card standalone be good in certain Emerald decks? I mean, obviously the thing that comes to mind is like pairing it with this, because every character your opponent plays gets a damage counter, so they can't even play around it with resist, and then none of their characters can challenge your characters unless they have healing. So Ravensburger trying to make healing relevant, maybe. But I can't see this really having that much utility outside of a deck dedicated to damaging characters. Because obviously with Lorcana, the whole thing, if you've watched high-level Lorcana, fast gameplay Lorcana, you're not damaging characters. You're removing characters, right? Like, I'm not, okay, I deal a damage here and there, and, your character survives, and now I can trigger all these effects because you have a damaged character in play. That's why this strategy has not really panned out too well. It's just because it's more efficient to just remove the character. I tried to test like Ratigan, right? The card that taps down and then readies up one of your characters. You get really good value off of a card like that. And in testing, I was like, Medusa is just better. Just remove the character. Like Ratigan is still situational. I still need stuff to happen. They need to have a character with 3 or less strength. I need to have a character I want to ready up and actually take advantage of the character I'm exerting. And it was just like, it's too hard to pull off stuff like that. It's too hard to set up some of these combos. The efficient, straightforward stuff, that's what wins. But, this card isn't necessarily bad. I just think we maybe need to see the best way to utilize this card. There could be some interesting combos and synergies with this card, I think, that you could be playing and using. Next up, you got Duchess, a 2-cost inkable 3, 2 costs for 1. Nothing to see there. You got Anastasia, the other sister. Wait, are they have like the same artwork? No, this one's falling, and this one's falling forward or pushing. Oh no, she is pushing her sister. I see. Okay. A 3-cost inkable 3/1 bossy stepsister Anastasia. Love that name. Reminds me of the film, which I don't think is a Disney film. Anyways, whenever this character is challenged, the challenging player chooses and discards a card. Whenever this character is challenged. Okay. And then it quests for 2. So, not great because of the 1 willpower. I mean, you don't want to let this thing live because it quests for 2, but it costs 3. So it's kind of like a Merfolk, but it's much more expensive. And at least, unlike Merfolk, this card trades out the card that's challenging it usually. but it is really susceptible. Like, you're not, like, the thing with Merfolk is it costs 1 ink, and if it gets Storm Rage, yeah, like, it uses up your tempo a little bit. Either your Cinderella sings it or you hardcast it for 3. Whereas this card, you know, on 3, if it gets like Storm Rage by a Cinderella or something, like, that's just really bad value. If it gets challenged out by like a Tipo, that's really bad value. The Tipo goes as well as this, but the Tipo did its job. I mean, it does. I guess it forces you to go -2 as the Tipo player because you ink from your hand and then you discard off this. But yeah, I don't want to say it's completely terrible, but like, I just don't think it's that great, just because it is a little bit easier to interact with. Next up, we got the super rare Pete, an Emerald Steel Space Pirate, and this is the shift. So the shift 1 Pete. I mean, are you keeping that around for 4 turns until you can shift it onto this? I don't know. 6 cost inkable, shift for 4, 5/5 stat line, so good stats. Quest for 2, while this character is exerted, opposing characters can't exert to sing songs, and your pirate characters gain resist +1. I mean, just the fact that it's a shift 4, 5/5 that quest for 2 and has a nice little ability, I would say this card is not the worst, but it's far from like a very good card in my opinion. Obviously, some decks, a lot of decks, don't really care to even play songs. And it's not even that they can't play them, it's just they can't sing them. Or exert to sing. The resist +1 is respectable to all pirates, including itself. So that's something to take away from it. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would say I'm middle of the road with it. The thing holding it back is the cost, right? It is expensive, and you do have to shift it to get really good value out of it, in my opinion. Because obviously, you know, to be exerted, you want to shift and quest with it or challenge with it. Probably quest. It's a quest for 2. And to do that, you need the shift. So if you don't have the shift and you raw play this out, it's just a turn slow. All right, we got the first legendary, Lady Tremaine, Bitterly Jealous, a 3/3 statted body that costs 6 and is uninkable, quest for 2. This is what I mean about this card design. I'm paying 6 ink, and it's uninkable for a 3/3 body that quests for 2, but I probably want to use the ability, or you're giving me nice versatile options that I can either use the ability or quest, but I'm paying for it. I'm paying heavily for it by putting a 6 cost uninkable in my deck for only 3/3 stats. Return chosen damaged character to their player's hand, then each opponent discards a card at random. So return chosen damaged character to their player's hand. That could be your own damaged character to your hand, and then it forces your opponent to discard anyways, or it's an opponent's character and it forces them to discard. So where this character or where this card can be good is obviously like it's a Bruno on legs, right? I would have really liked to see this thing cost 5. I mean, it might be too powerful if it costs less, because you want to discard your opponent's whole hand, and then you want to start bouncing all of their stuff back to their hand and auto discarding it, right? The 3/3 stat line is basically survivability, right? You're not challenging with this really. You're not, you're just hoping that when it does get exerted, if your opponent has an existing board that you haven't outed yet, like, it can survive whatever's being thrown into it. And then I guess you can look at the 2 quest as like, well, once you've dealt with the opponent's board and there's nothing really left to return and or hand, or there's no damage characters to return, you would quest with it, and it quests for 2. But I'm not paying 6 for a 2 quester. You know what I mean? To have the option to do the actual effect. The actual effect is decent. And when I say a Bruno on legs, obviously this thing has to return a damaged character. But it has some merit in returning your own stuff too, right? Keep that in mind. But again, if I use the ability, I'm not questing and I lose out on 2 lore. So like, oh, let me return my damaged goat. It's like, yeah, but you could have just quested with the Tremaine and kept your goat on board to continue to quest with it and also have it as a body that can do stuff. Not a fan of this one, just because it just seems misaligned on so many levels, in my opinion. Next up, we got Wake Up Alice. Return chosen damaged character to their player's hand. If you watch my gameplay video on TTS, my friend used this on me and it totally screwed up my curve. I think I lost the game because of that, because I didn't see this card coming. It's an interesting card for sure. In the right decks, I think you could play it. A 1-cost inkable action, like, sure, as long as you have card draw, right, to get through cards. Like, you just want to rifle through these kind of cards, because when they're not good and you draw them when, like, you're in a critical moment, it can be like, yeah, I just lost. So next up, you got He's a Tramp. That is a wild thing to say on a card, in my opinion. Anyways, a 1-cost inkable song. Chosen character has +1 strength this turn for each character you have. That, the Mulan card, Improvise, is +1 strength, draw a card, right? And that's not a song. This is a song. This does not draw a card. It potentially gives you a bigger boost. The Tramp is this card on a body. I don't know, the fact that this is a song. Again, like, what Emerald decks are you really trying to boost strength with? Nothing currently that exists, I don't think. I think you're playing this for the ability that it's a song and an action. That's, half decent. But it doesn't give you a redraw or anything. So, yeah. Alright, next up we got the other Enchanted, The Return of Hercules, 5-cost inkable song. Each player may reveal a character card from their hand and play it for free. So my friend was showing me again a combo where you can play that Queen of Hearts, damage all of your opponent's stuff, and then you play this card, and then you play that old Prince card that costs like 9 or something, and it banishes every damaged character your opponent has in play. So it's a cute little combo. Obviously, it's a combo, so, like, the odds that you set that up is slim to nil. But it's not a terrible card. I don't think it's a very good card right now. That being said, it's not completely devoid of value. Like, what deck your opponent. I mean, but again, like, there's no side decks. Like, if there were side decks, this would again be a fantastic card to potentially side deck, because then you could side it in against decks are super low to the ground and can't take full advantage of a card like this. But then in other matchups, this card is a liability, so you're always going to be inking it, which means it's a dead card in that matchup. It's ink, it's land, which again makes it have some value still, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of giving my opponent something for free. All right, next up we got Ink Geyser. Now this card is what makes Emerald Sapphire a thing, a rare. Each player exerts all the cards in their inkwell. It only matters for you because it's your turn when you're playing this. Then each player with 3 or more cards in their inkwell returns cards at random from their inkwell to their hand until they have 3 cards in their inkwell. So this card, it's easy to look at this card and be like, okay, it's terrible, or okay, it's like super broken, right? And there's a couple of things to consider here. This is you have to break this card down a lot of different ways. So it's Emerald Sapphire, so you can only play it in this ink pairing. With this ink pairing, you're likely playing a lot of cards that are able to ramp. So you're thinking about, okay, I'm ramping, I'm getting to this card faster. Do I really need to play it early? No, because you want to play it when it has impact against your opponent. But what does matter is, do I have a setup where I can re-ink my cards quickly that I end up bringing back to my hand? And the only thing that really comes to mind, I shouldn't say the only thing, but the most relevant thing that comes to mind is already on board Fishbone Quills. So Fishbone Quills are already on board. Maybe I got like 2 or 3 of them on board. And I'm able to re-ink cards with the Fishbone. So I have readied up, 2 or 3 ink where I can develop something on the board. So with Emerald Sapphire, you're looking to play probably a Bend to My Will variation. You're not going to be able to Ink Geyser and then Bend to My Will discard all their cards in the same turn, most likely. And this is why it has the clause of exerting all your ink as well. You're doing that on your turn. But if you're able to deal with the opponent's board and then shut down their ink, think about like red-blue decks that basically function off of, I don't go wide on the board. I play a couple of very powerful interaction cards every turn, and I ramp up fast. So if by turn 7 you ink Geyser them and they're back down to 3 ink, they don't really play Fishbone. I mean, some of them are putting Fishbones back in, which probably is correct. But then your Fishbone has to still be on board. You can't be banishing it with a Hiram. I mean, I guess you can, because you can get it back with a new Tamatoa. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, there's a lot to take in with a card like this. What setups do I need to be playing for? What setups do I really want to have in place before I play this? Is this card going to be good in isolation on its own without any other setups? Scenario dependent, matchup dependent. Against aggro decks, you probably help them by returning cards to their hand, and they're back to like, okay, sure, I'll play a couple of interactions in a turn, sure. But again, in Emerald Sapphire, you can always ink this with your own Fishbone Quill or Tipo. So a very interesting card, a lot of experimentation to be had with that. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Oh, we got I didn't even see this was the other enchanted. Okay, I didn't see that yet. And then the final card is the Coil for this ink pairing. 3 cost uninkable. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, that's the generic effect for all of them, chosen character gains evasive until the start of your next turn. Now this one is a good item. I know we got these other ones to take a look at. Put a card into your inkwell, remove 2 damage. Not really relevant. Put a card into your inkwell, move a damage counter to an opposing character. A decent effect, but we talked about how conditional that can be. You need to have a damage character, or it just needs to be a damage character on board, and then you have to put it on a character on your opponent's side that you want, and it's only when you ink. This one, you just need a character in play, and then you can protect it with evasive. And obviously, you're playing characters. Yeah, this is a decent one. Yeah, it's not the best one. I'm sure you guys know what the best one is, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, it's a decent one. And with that, guys, we are going to wrap up the Emerald portion. Hopefully, I mean, these videos are supposed to get shorter and shorter since we've covered the dual inks already for the earlier pairings. But let me know what you think of Emerald if you made it this far in this video. If you have, thank you again for watching and the support, and stay tuned for the other inks before the set is released. Thank you for watching. Quantum is out.